In this video, we are going to talk about controlled components. We have already talked a bit about control components. In this video, we will see that it can also be done on our custom components rather than native form components. Okay. In particular, we are going to see that how to uh, pass data across various components. So in particular, let's say simply from parent to child, it is straightforward, right? But how to pass data among, let's say, two siblings? There is one component and there is another component which is sibling, and there is a piece of data which has to be shared among them. So that sort of thing we are going to have a look at. To get started, what we are going to do is that let's say we are having a sort of an input box where we can put some sort of amount which will be some currency, okay, and later we'll see that we can create a converter of currency, so let's say from US dollar to Indian rupee or something, okay. For the time being, let's have a simple component which just shows a particular input box, and in that we can type some amount of, let's say, US dollars, okay. So let's say there is a function. In fact, this is going to be a component, not a normal function. So this component is, let's say, amount in, let's say, USD, okay. And this component will essentially just have, let's say, an input, okay, and that input is going to be having our okay. So let's see, we can put it inside a div, we can move this inside div, we can put a dollar symbol, right, and then we can have an input box. We know that by default it is text, type text, but anyways, let's put type text, okay, and then we can use this here. So it is going to be amount in USD, and this is rendered here, okay. So finally it is going to look like something like this, okay. So we can just beautify it a bit by just, let's say, span dollar, and let's say we have just a space here, okay. So this is going to represent some amount in dollars, and we should write something here, right? So anything. So since it is type, let's keep it type number. That would be better suited for our application, right? So rather than having simply ABCD, we can only write numbers, okay. That is fine. Now this is right now an uncontrolled component. We know that, right? In fact, there is no way to track whatever is written here, whatever we are writing here. There is no way to track that. So we know that a better way will be to simply have, let's say, some state. We are trying to make it a controlled component. Okay. So we can have some sort of state. So let's say amount, set amount is equal to use state, okay, and let's say initially it is 0, and then I can have that amount here. So let's say value is equal to that amount, and then there can be an handler, let's say on change. We can simply, so let's say handle change. On handle change, what we can do is that simply whatever the event is passed, in that we will have event dot target dot value. We will take that and set it into set amount. So e dot target dot value, okay. So yeah, now you can see that I can write anything. Okay, and now this is a controlled component. That is fine. Okay, but what if I have a similar component, but this time I want to show my amount in, let's say, INR. So let's say there is another component which shows the same thing but in Indian rupee. Okay, now the problem is that you can clearly see that I can obviously create very easily another component, but the problem is that now both of these are completely independent. And let's have a symbol of rupee. Okay, so that is fine, but you can see that they are completely independent. I can write here anything, I can write here anything, both are completely independent. What we want is that there is the same data, let's say in US dollars, and that data has to be translated into let's say rupee, or let's say we change something here and that should be translated. So essentially there should be a single source of truth. Right now what is happening is that amount is in INR is separately tracked and this is separately tracked, right? So what can we do? So whenever we encounter such a situation, then in React there is a concept of lifting the state up, which means that if there is some data which is inside, let's say, amount in USD inside this, but if that data is needed in some other component which is outside this, let's say in this thing, right, we need here. So what we will do is that we will take this data, whatever, let's say, USD amount is there, or any one of them you can take, and then lift the state up, which means that rather than keeping it here, what we will do is that we will take that and keep it at one level above. What is one level above? One level above with respect to this component is basically this component. So essentially in this component we are going to maintain the data, and let's say we will maintain the data in USD, let's say. So we will take that from here and we will move that data here. Okay, and now for clarity, let's say this is USD, set USD. So basically it is amount is in USD, just to clarify, nothing else. That is fine. Now what we can do is that we can pass the value here. Okay, so we can pass, let's say, value is equal to, and then that USD I can pass. Now you can understand that this value is now available inside this component, right? But that will not be available as amount, that will be now available as props.usd. Fair enough. So we have to now use props also. Okay, this is fine. Okay, but what about this change? So right now just ignore this thing, we will come back to it, but right now just focus on this USD amount, that yeah, now I have moved that state here. So yeah, initially it is fine. Initially the first time, let's say we comment this, whatever, that is fine. Or let's say rather than commenting the whole thing, let's comment this much. Now technically this will work, right? But you can see that whatever I'm writing, that is so what is happening, you can see that this yeah, so this value is props dot value, right? So this should be props dot value, and now you can see that yeah, this zero thing is there, but whatever I'm trying to write anything, I'm not able to edit it, right? And that is because this is a controlled component and its value whatever, even if on change is being called every time, but its value will only change when props.value is allowed to change. Now props.value cannot change because props.value is essentially amount, this amount will only change when props dot value is USD, and this thing will only change when this set USD is called, right? Now set USD is never called, so this USD is never changed. That's why this is always 0, and that's why this thing is always 0, and that's why we are not able to edit it. Okay, so what to do? So the solution to this is not only state has to be moved, lifted up, actually its handler also is lifted up, something like this. Okay, and then what we do is that we pass this handler also as, we know that in property we can pass anything, right? So we can very well pass this handle change also. Now this on change is a prop which is available inside this, right? And now here I can simply call props dot on change. So you see what has happened. Essentially this is a controlled component, but it has delegated all its functionality to the parent component. So its value is also coming from prop, and the way this value is going to change on change, that thing is also going to be handled in the parent component. So when somebody types something in this component, then its on change will be called, but on change what will be called? This function will be called, and this function itself is passed from the outside here. Okay, and then this handle change will be called. Okay, so now it is the responsibility of this handle change to actually do the thing. Okay, so now here you can do this thing. Now where is this E coming from? E is coming from whoever is calling this handle change. I have just defined this handle change. Whoever is calling this handle change, that should pass the event, right? And this handle change is passed here, and that props dot on change is passed here, which means essentially whenever on change will be called, then we know that this thing will be called with event. So automatically this thing will be also called with the event. And now we see that we are able to edit it perfectly, right? So everything is working except that the entire thing is delegated to the parent component. If you see carefully, then earlier when we discussed about control components, then we saw that yeah, there is some form element, it has a value, it has on change, and this is what happens in a controlled component. There is a value, and on change dictates the change in that value, and if on change changes that value, then only the values can change. That is how it works, right? But if we see carefully, exactly the same thing is happening here also. So essentially this component is also a controlled component. So that's what my point was at the beginning of the video, that it doesn't need to be just standard DOM elements to be called as controlled components. Our custom components can also be controlled components. So if you don't dig inside this, if you simply see on the face of this component, then it clearly shows that its value will be this USD, which is initialized from 0, that is fine. And then whenever anything changes, then it can only be handled via this function, which is available in on change. Okay, so it is also behaving exactly like this. So this is also a controlled component. The only difference is that here in particular DOM element, if a particular DOM element is going to be controlled component, which is a standard HTML input fields, then this value and this value, which means that the prop value and the prop on change, this is like fixed. This is like how it is, value and on change. These are the static fields which has to be there, right? But these values are our custom defined values. We could have called this anything, prop value 1, value USD, any name we could have given, and then that prop we could have used here, right? So just it's just the difference that in controlled components we can change these values on as per our wish. Other than that, most of the things are essentially the same. Okay, so now we have this running example where amount in USD I can write, and essentially from inside the component we are able to change the state here. So you can see that this is sort of two directional transfer, right? React is called a one-way data binding, which means that data can only flow in one direction from parent to child, not the other way around. But you can clearly see that the for other way around, for changing data from inside to the parent, we have to pass our custom handlers. So here is the example where if we simply have to pass data USD to the component, then we simply pass it as a prop. But if we want to change this data from inside the component, then we essentially are passing a handler, and then whenever something needs to be changed, then essentially this thing will be called, and actually here it will be called, right? So now it is somewhat simpler because of this one-way data binding of React. It is somewhat simpler that the component which has the state defined, if there is any change in that component, then only that it can be changed only in that component, but that can be triggered from anywhere. So in this example you can see that handle change triggers it. In turn, handle change is called from here, so it is triggered from inside this component. That is fine, but actually the change is happening here at this line, which is part of this component only. Okay, so wherever the data is defined, only there you are actually changing. Okay, so this is the standard practice. Now let's say we want to use the same piece of data in this second component. So let's say amount in INR. But the difference is that again here also we will not have these handlers now. Simply we will have to pass some props and they will have the data. But that data need not be, so let's firstly copy this, but that data need not be USD. Okay, so it has to be in INR. Okay, so let's say there is a little function which does that. So let's say function convert USD to INR or something like that. Okay, and then this function gets the USD value and returns, let's say, I don't know, USD into 80. So I can call this little function here, and then I know that the state contains USD, that is fine. But as soon as it is passed, this is not passed as USD, but it is converted into INR. USD into 80 will give you INR value, and then that INR value is passed. Okay, now this value can be used inside this component as simply props dot value. Fair enough. Let's come back to this part. What if somebody changes here? Okay, so what you have to do is that here also like on change is fine, but and this function is already defined here which sets the USD, right? But in our case this is not USD change, rather this is sort of INR change. So let's name it INR change, and this function will be separately handled. Okay, let's not implement it, we will implement it in a bit, but you understand that this thing will go here, and then whatever is on change, that on change will be called from here. So props dot on change. Okay, now this on change is a different function, handle INR change. So now we can understand that at least one way flow will happen. The changing from INR to USD, that will not happen because we have not implemented this function. But let's see whatever we have implemented. So you can see that this is fine. Now if I write 1 or 2, then you can see that it is working fine, right? So one way data is happening, whatever yeah, so whatever amount I'm writing in USD, that is being converted here, right? But you can see that the other way around is not happening. If I'm changing something here, then I cannot even edit, even if I'm trying to edit, but I'm not able to edit anything here. I'm not able to edit anything here. Why? Because on change of this is not handled. So on change of this, it simply calls on change, which means that it calls this, but nothing happens here, and that's why we are not able to do any changes. However, we know that that is an INR value. So what we can do is that we can still set USD here, but the difference will be that first of all that this is INR value, right? This is INR value. Okay, so this INR value has to be converted to USD and then we have to give it back. Okay, so let's say we have a little function, something called, let's say, convert INR to USD. Okay, and then we can have exactly the same functionality where we'll simply, okay, so this is a normal function, not arrow function, and we'll have INR, and then we'll simply return, let's say, INR divided by 80. And then rather than having directly INR value, now E dot target dot value, which we know that it is INR value coming here, that INR value is converted to USD, and then that USD value is set here. So this changes this. If this changes, then we know that this first input field will also change. Okay, so you can clearly see that right now it is fine. Let's say $5 is 400, but if I change this 400 to, let's say, 450, then you can see that the USD has also changed. Okay, so whatever I am able to change here, that we can see here also. So this is an example how you can see that if there are two components which share data among each other, the first thing we have to do is that we have to lift the state up, right? So that in the parent component, and that will be essentially the nearest parent. So whatever the two siblings are there, whatever is the nearest parent to those siblings. So it can be like further away also. So let's say this is inside one level deep more. So and or this can be one level deep more. So inside some other component it can again be there, right? So we have to come at the closest parent neighbor, and then we can have the state there, and then from there we can pass the data, that is for one direction flow, and for the second direction flow we have to have particular handlers here, but then pass those handlers inside the component so that the data can be controlled even from inside the components, deep components, even if actually the transformation is happening at the level where actually the state is defined. Okay, so that should give you a fair idea about the different nature of control component. This kind of control components can also be there, and the pattern of lifting the state up in the scenarios when you need it. Okay, so yeah, that should be all for this one. See you in the next one.